World is going on. President Trump spent 90 minutes insulting our allies, mocking their negotiating skills, calling them weak, bullying them with American tariffs, telling them their countries couldn't exist without the United States, even using the tired and old insult that they'd all be speaking German if it wasn't for us. A line that was funny coming from James Gandolfini playing a cartoonish American general in the fantastic British satire In the Loop back in 2009. Great movie, by the way. But it is now rather a cringe line when it comes from the actual American president in Switzerland in 2026. He also confused Greenland with Iceland and demanded he be given it, misrepresenting history while denigrating Danish soldiers in World War II. And yet, as the former ambassador to the EU, Anthony Gardner, told Sky News, European leaders still appear to be bending over backwards to accommodate President Trump. In fact, President Trump is now claiming that he's gotten a deal. We haven't seen any confirmation of that or any details of any deal or the framework of what it is. But here's what he posted to Truth Social a moment ago, based on a very productive meeting that I have had with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte. We have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. Is that an off-ramp? Lots of folks predicted some version of taco, including Governor Gavin Newsom, who was in the crowd during President Trump's speech. You could see him right there laughing at times. Afterward, he told another outlet the speech was remarkably boring and remarkably insignificant, that Trump was never going to invade Greenland. It was never real. So what's in this supposed deal the president just announced? And does it restore any trust or any dignity? Joining us, staff writer for The Atlantic and co-host of Morning Joe, Jonathan Lemire. Staff writer for The Atlantic and MS Now political analyst, Ashley Parker. Contributing writer for Politico magazine and columnist for Foreign Policy magazine, Michael Hirsch. And Politico White House and Foreign Affairs correspondent, Eli Stokols. All right, John, you watched this. You've been writing about it today. Is it a surprise to you that the president is coming back home to America with something that he can claim as victory?
It's a bit of a surprise how quickly it happened. I mean, we know, first of all, President Trump talks a lot tougher on Truth Social than he does in a room, particularly a small gathering with other world leaders. The NATO Secretary General has made a point of really over-the-top flattery of Trump in the last year or so. He's navigated him reasonably well on certain issues. So that appears to be the linchpin, that whatever this was just discussed, and we should be clear, we don't know much. And Trump didn't offer much in the way of details. The very vague phrasing of the framework of a future deal. Who knows what that is? We hope to learn more in the coming hours, but it's enough for Trump to at least back down slightly during his very meandering speech earlier today, though he did say he wouldn't use force to take Greenland. He said it a couple different times. But every time he did, it was couched with braggadocio about how strong the U.S. military is. It had vague threats, pretty menacing threats towards Canada, to NATO allies who wouldn't say yes to Trump's request to get Greenland. So it didn't leave many people reassured. This meeting, this with the NATO Secretary General and the resulting Truth Social post probably will help once we learn more about the deal. But to your other question, Katie, I don't think this will restore the trust from the rest of the alliance, from Europe. The United States will be there. You know, it's simply unpredictable. It's not to be in Trump's inconsistency and changes his mind in a blink of an eye. That's not the reliability anyone wants from an ally.
Yeah, expand on that, Eli. You've been writing about trust as well. What do European leaders do without the trust of the United States?
Well, they start to hedge, Katie. They start to lessen their dependence on the United States so they're not as vulnerable to pressure from this administration or from a future administration. That essentially was at the main point that Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney was trying to get across in his speech to Davos yesterday, that the emperor has no clothes. And the emperor is not just Donald Trump. The emperor is the entire NATO alliance, the transatlantic partnership that has stood for 80 years. That's no longer going to work when you cannot trust the United States to play by the longstanding rules. And so you've seen Canada, you've seen Europe look to open up trading relationships with other parts of the world to diversify, so to speak, and to become more self-reliant in terms of their own security so that they aren't in this position. But, with Greenland, what it took was a lot of European countries sending troops, actual forces to the island of Greenland in a show of resolve. And ultimately, Donald Trump can claim he has the framework of a deal here. The only deal that's on the table here is the deal that Denmark and NATO have been offering for the better part of a year, which is work with us, expand your military presence. Let's, beef up Arctic security collaboratively. There is no deal on the table for the United States to purchase Greenland. Denmark has said that again today. Greenlanders don't want it. And so what you have here is the president meeting resistance and unable to really bully Europe and Denmark and Greenland into submission here, and really backpedaling furiously over the course of just a few hours today, walking back the threat of military force and claiming a framework of a deal here, but also walking back his threat to increase tariffs on European countries. So yes, it's a show of force by Europe that has succeeded for the moment, but there's still deep frustrations about even having to be in this position with a country that was, long thought to be a vital and reliable ally in the United States. And I think you're going to see a lot of countries continue to adapt accordingly and not to make the same mistake in the future.
So if it is just, what the Greenlanders and Denmark had been proposing all along, which is, build more bases. Let's talk about a national security deal. Let's find a way to ameliorate some of these concerns. If it is just that, Ashley, who in the administration is arguing that all of this drama and the lead up to that was worth it? The president insulting all of our allies, the president demanding Greenland, Howard Lutnick getting booed during a dinner, Christine Lagarde walking out of it reportedly. Who's arguing that any of these things was worth getting the deal that was always on the table?
Well, the president would argue that it was worth it, in part because there was always a central irony here, right? Which was that essentially everything the United States wants and has asked for vis-a-vis Greenland has been available. More military bases, a broader security framework, even more sharing in Greenland's natural resources. There was always this confusing element of why Trump would think he needed force to get exactly what he wanted, and which Greenland essentially said he could have. And I think the closest we come to that answer is the president's psychology as a builder and a real estate developer, which is that he said at one point when this very question was sort of posed to him, why would you use force to get what is available to you without force and in a way that doesn't upend the post-World War II alliance? He sort of said, well, psychologically, it's different. I feel like I need to own it. And he's sort of speaking of the difference of leasing versus buying and, what home ownership means when it comes to a sovereign nation. But that seems to be the key thing rather than any actual reality.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if any of that comes to pass. Again, we haven't seen a confirmation of a framework or what it would include. But I mean, he's not going to own it unless, something comes out. Like, he's not going to own it. There would have been a lot of insults, a lot of threats, a lot of damaging of trust, a rupture, as a lot of analysts put it, about the NATO alliance, losing trust. What about the dignity? Do Europeans get any of their dignity back with any sort of deal, Michael?
Yeah, I think very much so. I mean, it is true that Mark Rutte, who apparently was the one who put forward or discussed this framework deal, is known as the Trump whisperer. But again, alluding to what Eli was suggesting a little while ago, it started with the Europeans showing remarkable unity and defiance in a way that one rarely sees with this fractious European Union. I mean, sending troops to Greenland in the first place. Threatening trade sanctions, even bringing up the idea of the anti-coercion initiative, which would keep U.S. businesses out of Europe, and aided, of course, by the market reaction to sort of sell America trend that began yesterday and ended today. There's no question that the Europeans gained a lot of cred here in the way they handled it over the last few days. And we're going to see, how that translates in the future, because I agree that the trust is gone. It's now going to be, sort of head to head. It's not to say there's not going to be more flattery of Trump. There always is. One has to do that with him. But I do think that the Europeans have really stood up in a remarkable way here.
I kind of want to ask you and push back on that, or just ask you a question about the populations. Seeing these leaders be so flattering of Donald Trump, bending over backwards to say how wonderful he is and how smart he is, and thanking him for all he's done, as Mark Rutte has done. I mean, the text message, the over-the-top text messages where he says, "Can't wait to see you. You've done so much." The ones from Macron as well. I mean, do the populations, I know Rutte is not a country leader, but do the populations of Europe look at their leaders right now and say, "We're into this, we feel like you're doing the right thing," or are they going to feel they need somebody stronger? Are they going to feel like they need somebody who's going to more forcefully stand up to a guy that's acting like a bully?
Well, it's more than a bully, Katie. I mean, this is the point. I do think at least the elites of these populations understand that you're dealing with someone here who's, analogous to the crazy uncle in your house who you suspect might be a homicidal maniac and maybe even have a gun, but you have to dance, you have to talk to him in a certain way. I mean, this is indeed, sanizing it, as it were, the insane. I mean, this is, I think large numbers of these populations understand this. And what we've seen here, let's be frank about it, is another taco trade. We have seen, Trump always chickens out. He's done so, or it looks like he's doing so once again. And I think you're right. I think that the people are a little bit queasy over all the flattery that still goes on. But at the same time, I think you'll probably see favorable headlines in the weeks to come, if indeed it turns out that this so-called deal involves continued Danish control and ownership of their territory in Greenland.